Hi, and welcome to another Scientology Outside of the Church podcast. This is season 11, episode 4. This one is going to be entitled Why You're Mad at Scientology. This should be one that people want to check out, uh, to say the least, because there's a lot of bad press and things like that and upsets with Scientology. But I think it bears um, some scrutiny to look at. Is it the corporate church of Scientology, or is it the subject of Scientology, or is it something else? So I'm here with Quentin Stroud, my trusty sidekick, and we're going to get going on this. So why are people mad at Scientology?
Well, that's what I want to know too. It's interesting because um when I like to read, right? I like to read. I'm a very literate person, right? And for me, when I found Scientology again, like some 20, 23 years ago, when I found Scientology, I was just consuming books. And it was really, really interesting to me. It was just an interesting subject in general. And um what I read was all I had, right? What I read is what I knew, and it was obviously from the church. And then after things started kind of changing with the golden age of Tech 2 and different things that had come out sometime later, um, I was getting kind of confused of, well, what was wrong with Tech 1? And what was wrong with the way things used to
Right.
be, so to speak, or the way things were presented before. And of course, there was a whole justification on why we need to change this and why we need to change that and change this word to that word and this sentence to that sentence, so on and so on. But um, it was just really interesting to me that because I was so eager to consume the knowledge that is Scientology. I'm talking about the technology, not the institution of the church or the corporate side of things. But I was so interested in Scientology that it allowed me to um, take in as much as I could when I did.
Mhm.
And so when you ask the question, well, why are people so mad at Scientology? I was like, yeah, what gets a person to that place? So you tell me, what makes a person mad at a body of data?
Well, that's the thing. Is it a body of data, or, like Ellery says, that if you ever have any trouble with the technology, it's not the technology, it's the personalities involved. And then that
Hmm.
comes down to, and this is one of the senior policies, is deliver what's promised. So how could you get upset if what was promised, which is miracles for breakfast, how could you get upset with that? There's only one answer. What's promised, either in the materials, and I think that that's a big part of it, is that what's in the materials and what the corporate church is delivering are two different things. So they're not delivering what's promised. They're delivering
Hmm.
something else. And I had somebody mention to me today, um, who contacted me and is still in the church. They said, how is it that they're saying, all this stuff was altered and we had to fix it and now it's brand new again and we're putting it out there? They said, well, if that's the case, why was it that all the people beforehand in the decades before were getting all of these big, wonderful gains that you had to go find something that was changed? I mean, and this leads to one of the points for the podcast is that's a huge, huge outpoint.
Right, right.
When
Because so either A, what what was promised wasn't actually delivered back then, or was promised, or what was promised is actually not being delivered now. So we have to then ask the question, when
right.
LRH was alive, when LRH was running the show, when things were, and people were getting all these amazing gains, 50s, 60s, 70s, da da da, when people were getting all these amazing wins for, 25, 30 years plus,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Going free, clear, OT, da da da, all the stuff that was showing up with the technology. What was being delivered back then, either that wasn't actually what was being delivered,
Yep.
or what was being promised and wasn't being delivered, or what was being promised is not being delivered now.
Right. Right.
So which is which?
Right. So you've got, as far as outpoints, you've got, and this is from the data series again. We did a podcast on that a couple of podcasts ago. This is one of those things where you've got contrary facts, dropped out time, omitted data, and then in the data series, he talks about the point of reliable source. So the reliable source,
Hmm.
okay, if you think David Miscavige is the reliable source for Scientology, then you've supplanted him for LRH. Now you're
Mm,
believing what he says. You're not believing what LRH says, and then you have this doppelganger that they're using in the technology, like the way they've changed the definition of the second dynamic is the urge to survival through creativity. They actually changed it in the new ethics book. They changed it.
mm,
In the original ethics book, it's the urge of survival through sex and the rearing of children and family. I mean, that's a huge
hmm.
difference. That's a huge difference.
Yeah,
I mean, you could almost say it
right.
sounds like population control or something like that. So delivering what's promised is if you're dealing with a dynamic and you're auditing a dynamic, you're auditing creativity, you're not auditing the second dynamic. And so the reliable source thing comes in is you're looking at a book and you think that book is what the accurate information is. And it's not a reliable source because Miscavige and company have gone in and changed it. So when they've gone in and changed it, now you can't deliver what's promised because you're auditing something that is not what the accurate terminology definition is. And correct definitions are everything in order to get the desired results in auditing and or study. So you could see how people could get upset with something when they're dealing with one thing that isn't what's supposed to be handled. They're dealing with another. Now, creativity can be audited as well. But the thing
Hmm.
is, if you're not delivering what's promised because things are changed, LRH says, only 10% of your income should be put towards your bridge back in the 70s, and now they're wanting you to put 10 times what your income is on credit cards in order to pay for services. And then they're giving you auditing sessions where the FN has to swing 3 times and you get overrun. And then you have to pay more money for that particular action to get repaired on it because you're overrun. So are you delivering what's
Right.
promised? No, you're not. You're
Mm-mm.
getting you're getting something else, and this is where people get upset or they have ARC breaks because
Right.
they're getting the picture of one thing and they're being told one thing, but they're actually getting something else. It's a false bill of goods.
Hmm.
That's why
It's
people are
interesting.
upset.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because I used to get into these calm cycles with my reg at the time. I used to get into these calm cycles because I would have something being told to me. I would be enlightened on a certain matter. And then I would say, wow, that sounds really interesting. I want to know more about that. Where did you get that reference from? I would get the reference, of course. And then I would go up to the qualification library, like on the
And
seventh floor or sixth floor, I think. And then I would look it up and I would read the entire policy. I would read the entire thing. I would literally sit there in the qual library and read it. Most people don't do that, right? Most people just take what was said at face value
verbal data.
and
Hmm.
there you go, verbal data, which LRH speaks against, right? Most people would take what they say at face value and then let that kind of be what it is. But I think that when this starts to happen, it's easy for things to get kind of discombobulated. And then what was promised really gets lost in what is hoped for, right? What is hoped
Yeah.
for. So then you
Yeah.
start throwing money at what's hoped for,
Right. And that was the
which is
point that I
different.
was, but that was the point that I was trying to make uh is you're being sold a bill of goods that is something else because you're getting verbal data or you're getting altered data, which violates reliable source. You should always go to the materials and see what they say. You shouldn't watch some glitzy TV program or some glitzy event or whatever when you're they're literally saying these are the things, this is what's happening, this is what we found out, da 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 da. LRH read all of the stuff. It was all proofread by him in the end, and he would go, okay, yeah, this is right. And they're saying that the transcriptionist did this and all this jazz because they can't have the copyrights on the stuff anymore. They don't have the copyrights on the stuff. They don't have anything to sell. They don't have
Hmm.
anything to sell. So you're altering over and over and over and over again. It's like a game of telephone, you know. We
Hmm.
used to play as kids. By the time it gets to the other end, it's something completely different. This is why you're not getting people getting the delivery of what it is that's promised because they're being told
Right.
one thing. I had somebody say to me back in the 90s, they said, "Well, I've done the L's. I can't go PTS." I'm gonna use your
What?
expression. I'm gonna use your expression. Cha.
Cha.
Yeah. I just thought, at the time I was like, how is that? And
Right.
in delivering nails, there isn't one goddamn thing in any of the materials that says you can't go PTS after getting the L's rundowns.
What does one have to do with the other? I don't get where they even came from.
Well, right, but that's my point. That's my point is this person who is now deceased from cancer, from cancer. Yeah,
Jeez.
just let that sink in a minute. Okay.
Yeah,
The
it's
very same
terrible.
person said, oh, how can this happen? I can't go PTS. I've done my else. There we go. Wrong source, incorrect,
Hmm.
altered information that was
Hmm.
told by a registrar or somebody else that isn't in any of the materials because because they can't see the materials of the L's rundowns. Now that's, Allard says there's no such thing as a
Mm.
hidden data line. But see, the thing is, it's not a hidden data line if you're a class 8, class 9, and then you get trained to class 10, 11, and 12, which is L10, 11, and 12. That's what those levels are for. So they're not privy to it. So they're stuck in a situation where they can't have that information. And so they have to believe what is being told to them as truth because they trust these people. But I mean, that's the worst case scenario I could possibly think of is that, LRH says the worst kind of wrong is dead wrong.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying anything against the L's. I'm just saying wrong information. She didn't get delivered what was promised. She got
Right.
something else. Now, promising that you won't go PTS after you get the L's, that's not delivering what's promised. You can't tell somebody this is going to do that when it won't do that. That's the worst not delivering what's promised scenario I can possibly think of. I mean, it's mind blowing.
Right.
Oh, you
Yeah.
need to get some more
It,
correction. You need to buy more intensives because this shouldn't be happening. And then the person ends up dead.
oh,
Anyway.
geez. Yeah. No, what LRH says in the Sahel Outtech, the reference on Outtech. I think it was looks like 27 November 1967. 22nd of November 1967. He says, if at any time a supervisor or other person in an org gives you interpretations of HCOBs, policy letters, or tells you that's old, read it but disregard it. That's just background data, things of that sort. Or gives you a chit for following HCOBs or tapes or alters tech on you, or personally cancels HCOBs or policy letters without being able to show you an HCOB or policy letter that cancels it. So in other words, there's a policy. If there's something that's changed, there's a policy letter that LRH wrote that says, "I'm changing this." Right?
Right.
This is to be changed. Right? If they person cannot show you that, that is it, he calls it a felony. He calls it a felony. It goes on to say that all of Dianetics and Scientology works. Some of it works faster. The only real error auditors made over the years was to fail to stop a process the moment they saw a floating needle. Isn't that interesting? You
Mm-hmm.
just said that now
Mm-hmm.
the policy is it has to float three times, back and forth, back
Yes.
and forth, back and forth, back and forth,
Right.
and
Three
then you
swings.
flee.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, no. It says that stuff. The only time an auditor has failed was when, or error auditors that make, was when they failed to stop a process the moment they saw a floating needle. That's when the auditor makes a mistake. Okay. He then goes on to talk about this felony that happens when they start to change these policies. And he goes on to say here, it says any supervisor or executive who interprets, alters, or cancels tech is liable to the assignment of the condition of enemy. All the data is in HCOBs or policy letters or on tape. That's it.
In their original
That's it.
form. In their original
Correct.
form.
Correct. Without alterations.
Right.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
there you have it. I mean, one of the things that the church started doing is used to have HCOBs that would show where improvements were made to it or something like that, that LRH
Hmm.
added something, that type of a thing later on down the road, because he did do that.
Hmm.
And that's his prerogative. But what they've
Hmm.
done is that now when they make alterations to it, they take out all of the data trail of what it originally said, and changes are in this font or this script, and now there isn't anything. You just don't know that it's changed. So then that enters into the hardest thing to spot as a missing this. You don't know what the original version said or what the additions were. They
Right.
just make them, and now you're believing it as the gospel. It'd be like going in and changing the Bible and not saying we added this or we deleted that, or that type of a thing. And so again, that's not delivering what's promised.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting because the reason why we at AOGP make all this stuff available to you online, make it available to you in the lectures and things of that nature, all these things are available to you because number one, this is LRH tech, right? And no religious technology center or organization has the copyright on that, right?
Yeah.
And so this is available to humanity, right? And he says that one of the failures to get the results on a PC is that you're not studying your HCOBs and books and tapes, not applying what you studied, following advice, somebody advising you contrary to what you found on HCOBs and tapes, and failure to obtain HCOBs, books, and tapes needed.
Hmm.
That's where you do not get the results
Right.
as a PC,
Right.
right? And so getting this data for yourself, going into the college, logging in, doing your course, reading the materials, getting clearing the words in the materials. This is vitally important for you getting the gains and the wins that are promised to you by LRH, by the subject of Scientology, that you can get these amazing wins. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And you get these things that's promised to you when you do the work, when you study, when you read and clear your words, when you do this stuff, and then you sit down and you say, and you see when the needle floats. First time you see it, okay, your needle's floating. Whoa. And you feel it and you know it, right? This
Hmm.
is good stuff. But you got to make sure you get it in as a being, right? You got to make sure you get it in. You can't put that in somebody else's hands. I'm telling you what I know.
Right.
You can't put that in somebody else's hands.
Yeah. Well, he says in the steps to keeping Scientology working, one of them is having the correct technology.
Yeah.
This is where people get upset with Scientology. It's not just they're having the correct technology themselves. It's that the organization and the people that are putting trust in within that organization, who they themselves may not know that the organization changed those materials. Okay, so let's make it the right target, whether it's
Right.
David Miscavige himself or somebody else. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that kind of goes beyond scope, but the thing is it's been changed. So right there, you don't have the correct technology, and you wouldn't know it because you're in the corporate church and you just think, well, I can trust these guys. Look how fancy these buildings are. That's that's the thing. I mean, think about that for a second to our listeners. Think about that. Just because they have all this glitzy stuff and everything like that, and these pretty uh, uh, magazines and
Edifices.
edifices and all this stuff, you think, well, they must have the right technology.
Mm-mm.
That's not right. But the thing is you have to find out what the correct technology is. You can't just take it at face value because I mean, you look into who you bank with before
Mm-hmm.
you bank with them. You look into a broker before you hook up with a broker to go do trading. You look into a car
Right.
dealership to see if it's reputable, that type of a thing. And then you get into ratings, and then ratings are based off of people's satisfaction or dissatisfaction with something. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
if the ratings are bad and they have dissatisfaction, what's happening? They they didn't get what was
Something's not being
promised and
delivered.
delivered. Right.
Yep.
Just like that.
Yep. Well, I
It's that
like what you
simple.
said too. Right. I like what you said about too really finding the like where's the wrong target? Like something's amiss here. LRH says in the data series 20 on 26 November 1970, he says that wrong source. So
Yes.
there's wrong target and then there's wrong source.
Right.
He said wrong source is the other side of the coin of wrong target.
Hmm.
Information taken from wrong source, orders taken from the wrong source, gifts or material taken from wrong source all add up to eventual confusion and possible trouble. So it's like at some point, if you're taking information, gifts or promises, material, orders, if you're taking that from wrong source, somewhere you're going to get a confusion or you're going to get into trouble, right? Or
Hmm.
both. It says and trouble,
Yep.
right? So you're going to get into trouble. And so if we're not careful in really making sure we have right source, then and this is up and I'm putting the onus on each of us as responsible beings to make sure we do our due diligence, make sure you dig deep, make sure that when you're talking to an auditor, when you're talking to somebody and they give you this data or whatever this information is, make sure you get the reference on that,
Right.
right? Make sure
Do
you know
your due
exactly where this is
diligence.
coming from.
Right. Do
Hmm.
your due diligence. And that's why we exist, is because we have the original materials. All of the original printings of the books and everything are on our courses online in the College of Independent Scientology.com. The bulletins, the lectures, the transcripts, all of this stuff.
Right.
You don't even know that it exists unless you go on eBay and you take one page next to the other, first printing to 20th printing of Dianetics, and you go, wait a minute, there's a paragraph missing. I mean, it's hard to find. And that's what they bank on in the
Mm-hmm.
corporate church is you
Mm-hmm.
you never know. And so you've got wrong source. They are now the source instead of LRH, since he's not here anymore for almost 40 years. And so now you're targeting the subject of Scientology incorrectly as it not being what it was that you were promised. That's a wrong target.
Yes. That's so good. There are those people who have their own, shows and YouTube videos and conversations, books and all that stuff, and you're targeting the wrong. You're choosing the wrong target. You're selecting the wrong target because the tech. He said it. Dynamics and Scientology works. Some of it works faster. Dynamics and Scientology works. So you're targeting something that actually does work, but it's the wrong target, and only because you got the other side of the coin, which is wrong source. And so whether when we make a decision to pursue a certain track, right, whatever that track is, it makes sense to make sure you know what you're doing as you're going along this track, right?
Right.
And when you get a quote off the internet or when you get something that don't just take that at face value. Do your research. Even on this podcast, if you hear me give a reference, because I love reading references. If you hear me give a reference or Jonathan give a reference, and we'll tell you where it's coming from, go and read that reference. Don't just be like, well, they said, Pastor said, That's what they
Yeah,
used to say in
yeah,
the
yeah.
church.
And
Pa- Pastor
that's
said we need to do.
right. That's what's happening. And it's so easy to do because you got this guy standing on a stage with this fancy background, all this fancy music, and all these fancy digital images, and all this stuff. And it's the same thing that they do in the news media on TV and commercials. Just because there's no truth in advertising, and nobody does their due diligence and doesn't know any better, and you have to dig deeper and do a deep dive on things to find out what's real and what's not.
Yeah. I think this is a really, really good just moment to say, woosah. Of everything that I've heard, everything that I've taken at face value, everything that I've ingested, and that's made me look at Scientology in a way that, like, well, angry. So the subject of the conversation is, why are you angry at Scientology? Like, talking about the subject. Why are you angry at Scientology? Why are you angry at a body of data? And the only reason why one would be angry at it is because what was promised isn't being delivered. And so people come out of these spaces and places where it's not being delivered, and they find somewhere like ALGP that delivers these successes, deliver these wins. Look at the website. Look at the scores of testimonials and things that are talking about, like, these are real wins. We publish them often,
Hmm.
wins that people are having, right?
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean that stuff doesn't go, wrong, and things don't get, messed up, and people don't have problems and stuff like that. Life is life, right? Life be lifing.
Hmm.
But when you can sit down and you can get the data for yourself, and we overtly make it available, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You get the data for yourself, and then say, that's something I want to experience. That's something I want to know about. I logged in and I did my classes, I did my courses, and I want more of that. I want to experience that. That's what Scientology is supposed to feel like.
Hmm.
It's supposed to feel like, wow, isn't that wonderful? Wouldn't that be wonderful for me to feel that way, to have those abilities rekindled, rehabilitated in myself as a being? It's all in you, Dorothy. You've had the
Hmm.
power all along,
Hmm.
you know? And now it's time for us to unlock that. And so I love this conversation. I'm glad that we got to the bottom of why people might be mad at Scientology.
Right. It's not Scientology the subject, it's the corporation itself, because like he says, and I can't give you the name of this reference because it doesn't exist in any of the OEC volumes anymore. I saw it back in 1989, and it was a single policy letter before the corporate church deleted it from the organization executive course that said, if you ever have any trouble with the technology, it's not the technology, it's the personalities involved. That's what it comes
Hmm.
down to. And the personalities involved are those personalities who have altered the technology and made themselves and supplanted themselves as the source, the correct source, instead of LRH as the correct source. That's it.
Yeah,
End of story. And that's something
that's
that
it.
you have to take a look at. It doesn't go any further than that. It's because you've got to have the correct source. You've got to have the right materials. Same thing, but said in a different way, and not a personality involved. And that's what it's become, the chairman of the board of the Church of Scientology and all this stuff. That's it.
Right.
That's it. So you need to go back and you need to find the original stuff. We've got it on our website. You can pull it down, you can look at it, you can do your research, you can ask us for references and take a look at this stuff, but it's not the subject. The subject really works. Miracles for breakfast, miracles as usual. And if you're not getting that, it's because something has been altered. He says, what you do this, you get that result. They don't. That's why the mess, because it's a public relations nightmare, because they can't do that. They can't duplicate the material well enough anymore because it's been changed so much that it's something else. And people mistake
Mm,
the church for the subject, and the subject is completely different.
different. Yeah, that's so good.
So we hope you've enjoyed this podcast. It's a lot to take in a short period of time, but if you listen to it and you kind of do some demos with it and you go, oh, okay, okay, I see, I could see how this could be. We guarantee you'll see what we're talking about on this, and you shouldn't be mad at the subject of Scientology. If you didn't get from it what you thought you would get, where did you get the information that you thought you would get those results? Did you get it from a bulletin, a lecture, transcript, a book, something like that, or did you get it from somebody else? And why are they giving you verbal data about it? And then
Mm,
you need to find where the correct source is and what you're really supposed to get. Or are you even supposed to get that? And it was something that was canceled, like the Survival Rundown. And LRH never wrote it, but they're still delivering it to this very moment that we're doing this podcast. Interesting, isn't it?
mm, mm,
Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this. It's a real bean burner, but you need to take in consideration if you've ever been in Scientology, don't wrong target the subject. Look at the personalities involved and get the correct information, and we can give that to you. And you don't have to give up. And the things that you think you should have gotten from Scientology may not be so, but we can tell you what they really are. And we can clean up your ARC breaks with a free ARC break session using a theta meter remotely. From the comfort of your own home, you can do our courses on the College of Independent Scientology.com. And we also have a half price bridge special going on right now, where you can get up the bridge for half of our price. Half, not the churches. We're looking at a fraction from what the church charges. So get up the bridge today, get the wins you thought you should have gotten, and we'll get you in session and we'll make you OT. Namaste, and we love you. Bye bye.
peace.